Thank you for joining us. Can you tell us who you are, what your role is at the IRC Phoenix office? Just tell us a little bit more about you.
Sure. My name's Stanford Prescott. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for the International Rescue Committee in Arizona. I've been with the IRC for about 3 years now. And at our work in the IRC, we do refugee resettlement, helping refugees when they first arrive here in the Valley to restart their lives here in the United States.
Amazing. So I was wondering, what was your career path before the IRC, and have you always had an interest in helping refugees?
Yeah, so for me, my background is I worked on a number of political campaigns and civic engagement initiatives. I did a lot of work with the immigrant rights community, particularly with undocumented immigrants and dreamers before transitioning over to the IRC. And that was just, a continuation of being able to work on some of these same issues around immigration and refugee rights and how that impacts the Arizona community.
Oh, I see. So, what are some of the other roles of your colleagues at the office, and who do you work most closely with?
Yeah, so we have a very wide team. We have a lot of programs at the IRC in Phoenix. At our core services, we provide work for when refugees first arrive, we help them get housing. We help them find employment. We provide classes around adult education. We help kids enroll in school. We help them connect to a doctor. And we also help with any mental health needs. And so those are our core services. Those are all provided in the first few months after resettlement. And we have a number of staff that work on those, employment specialists, housing specialists that handle those roles. Beyond that, we also have an economic empowerment team that helps refugees learn about the finance system and how to build credit and how to save in a bank account for purchases. We also have a new Roots program that helps refugee farmers and an immigration program that helps refugees apply for permanent residency and U.S. citizenship. And in my role as community engagement coordinator, I do work on advocacy, communications, and outreach. And so I do work with staff from all of those departments in order to actually communicate about their programs. And so I have to work with each staff member to learn about their program and then to tell the general public about it.
And has your role changed at all, like during this pandemic and the COVID-19 crisis?
Yes. So our work at the IRC has changed significantly. Most obviously, we're working from home right now. I'm taking this meeting from my living room, not from the office. And so there's been a fundamental change there in terms of how we work as staff in order to promote that safety. But beyond that, the needs of our clients have changed. Obviously, right now, it is not normal out there. And so people are losing their jobs. People are worried about losing their homes. There's needs for food and other basic hygiene items. Kids are out of school. And so we've had to rethink how we do our programs and what types of programs we do in order to meet the needs of those community members. So in many cases, that means moving those programs online. So for instance, when we teach a class, obviously we're not doing it in person anymore. We might do it over Zoom or another method. But also meeting the emergency needs. A lot of refugees worked in industries like hospitality, transportation, restaurants, and those are all industries that were really hard hit by the pandemic. And so many refugees have lost their job or lost hours at their job. And so we're helping to make sure that they have the basic things, rental assistance, utility assistance, food, to keep their families on their feet.
You mentioned that you are moving some of your programs online. How are you giving access to these refugees to technology and so they're able to go on Zoom? Do you provide that for them?
Yeah, that is a really good question, and that's also been a significant barrier in one of the programs that we've had to kind of think about is how do we overcome this. Many refugees have grown up using cell phones and texting, and actually in countries around the world, if you go to Africa or Asia, it's very common for people to have a cell phone and to text each other. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they have, when they arrive here in the US, that they have a laptop or that they have online access at their home or that they know how to use something like Zoom or email. And then language barriers, of course, are a difficulty. If you're trying to send somebody an email about a new Zoom class and that email is all in English and they don't speak English, that's a barrier as well. And so we have made a really intentional effort to both through ourselves as well as through our partner organizations, help refugees connect to the internet, and helping them find low-cost options for the internet, providing donated laptops when possible, and also connecting other partners who have laptops, and then also providing digital literacy classes so that they know how to navigate. And that's been throughout. That's both for the adults who might be trying to connect to our adult education services, but also for kids who might be trying to, take their normal classes through school online, but might need that additional assistance.
Right. How do you think the resettlement process has changed also with the pandemic? Have they had to use more forms online? How has the process changed with interviews with the refugees in these camps?
Yeah, so resettlement is currently paused. There are no refugees arriving in the US, and there haven't been for a few months now. So our work, at least for the IRC in Phoenix, has been really focused on helping the people who have arrived here in Arizona. And the nature of that work has changed in a lot of the ways that I just talked about, because folks that typically when somebody arrives here in the US, our typical pathway is we help them get an apartment, we help them get a job, and then they're self-sufficient. We have some additional programs that can help them down the line, but they're expected to have that job and keep paying their bills. But the reality is if a lot of people have lost their jobs because of the economic impacts of the pandemic, then we have to figure out how to help them navigate that. And so that's both through donations and providing assistance, but also helping people connect to government programs. Going back to the digital barriers and the language barriers, if you say you're a refugee from the Congo and you speak Kinyarwanda, you haven't really used a computer before because you grew up in a refugee camp where you might have had a cell phone, but you didn't have a computer. And then to file unemployment, you have to go to DES and file an online application and do it in English. Obviously, there's a number of barriers there, both in terms of having access to the internet, knowing how to navigate the website, just knowing how to file that unemployment claim, and then knowing, the language itself, being able to read an English website. And so that's really where our team is coming in right now, is we're helping people navigate through those government benefits, through those private donations, and how can they get the things that they are eligible for.
So, how has the IRC Phoenix advocated for refugees in the Phoenix community now? And how are you guys spreading awareness, especially online, since it's harder to hold more events during the pandemic?
Yeah, so of course we have a really active Facebook page. I'd encourage anybody who's watching this video, go like us on Facebook, IRC in Phoenix. And we also have our website, rescue.org/Phoenix. We're continuing to post stories there. We have done a lot of advocacy with government to educate about the specific challenges that refugees may face. I just hit on several of them, about some of those language and digital and cultural barriers, and the need for governments to be thoughtful when they are designing their relief programs about how that is, about how they're going to navigate those barriers. And so we worked very closely with the city of Phoenix. The city of Phoenix, thankfully, voted to allocate $3 million to refugee assistance. Specifically, a portion of that went to rental and utility assistance, a portion went to specific programs, and another portion went to small business assistance. And so we're really grateful that the city of Phoenix chose to allocate that funding, and we're continuing to work with other cities like the city of Glendale and in Tucson with the city of Tucson, as well as the county governments on the specific barriers that refugees may face.
In what ways have you seen the community also become involved with the IRC, and how they kind of help the organization? Have you seen any others just kind of help with that advocacy as well?
Yeah, so now help is needed more than ever right now for our refugee community. On top of all the barriers that refugees normally face, they also have to deal with a pandemic. And so for folks who are interested in supporting, what I would encourage, one, go to our website, go to our Facebook, like those, share those. Very easy way to help spread awareness. Beyond that, we are always looking for donations. You can donate either directly, but we also have an in-kind Amazon wish list where you can order everything from face masks to diapers to toilet paper, and you can have it shipped to us and we'll give it to a refugee family in need. We've actually distributed several hundred care packages over the past few months to refugee families that had special needs. And then we've also, beyond that, we do have some remote volunteer opportunities. Obviously, the nature of those volunteer opportunities has shifted significantly because of the pandemic, but there's opportunities to contribute online as a volunteer. One example is we've had people sew masks and send those sewn masks in, and then we're able to distribute those out.
Oh, that's great. I kind of want to shift a little bit here. I'm going to ask more questions about the refugees and their process in coming here. Although you said that resettlement has been paused for right now, can you describe the process they did have to go through in order to get to the US?
Yeah, so refugees who go through the U.S. Refugee Resettlement Program, this is an intensive process. It's actually the most vetted and most secure way to enter the U.S. as an immigrant. It is a lawful process, and in its current form has existed more or less since the Bush administration after 9/11. And specifically what happens is someone must claim refugee status from the UN. Refugee status has a very specific definition that's separate from other immigrants. Basically, it's somebody has a fear of violence or persecution in their home country because of their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership of a social group. So to give an example, the Rohingya in Burma, they are an ethnic minority, they are a religious minority, were targeted by the military dictatorship in Burma, and because of that, they were forced to flee into India and into Bangladesh. That is a very clear example of refugee status. They weren't just leaving to find a new job, they were leaving because of this threat of death in their home country. So once somebody is granted refugee status by the UNHCR, they can apply for third country resettlement. There's a number of countries, including the United States, like Canada and Sweden and Australia, that do refugee resettlement. If they're selected to go into the United States process, they then go through the US vetting system. This includes multiple layers of background checks and interviews by multiple agencies within the federal government, folks like the FBI, CIA, Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Health and Human Services. And the goal of all these background checks and interviews is to determine if somebody has had a terrorist background or a criminal background. And if somebody has been involved in these kinds of things, they're actually barred from entering the US as a refugee. Assuming that they pass all of those checks and they pass all of those interviews, they then go through a medical screening, both to identify any medical needs they might have when they enter the US, but also to see if they have certain contagious diseases which would prevent resettlement into the US. Beyond that, there is then cultural orientation classes provided before they depart, and these are classes on things like what are the laws in the U.S. and what side of the road do you drive on? Very basic things that you and I might take for granted, but would be different for refugees in compared to their home countries. And then they come to the U.S. Typically, this is through a flight. We usually meet them at the airport. It's worth noting that the flight to the US is not a grant, it is not a gift, it's not a donation, it's a loan. And so that's one of the reasons families start working quickly when they arrive in the US, is because that is something that they're expected to pay upon arrival in the US. And when they do arrive, there are 9 refugee resettlement organizations in the United States. The IRC is one of them, and we're the largest in Arizona. And they are assigned to that refugee resettlement agency prior to arrival. And then that agency meets them at the airport and begins providing services. And those are all the things I mentioned earlier: housing, employment, health, education.
So when they do come to the United States and they're settled, what would you say the success rate is of these resettled refugees in terms of if they've been able to find work and been able to pay bills on their own or just able to thrive here?
Yeah. Refugees have a lot of success when they arrive here in both Phoenix and the United States. Refugees, first off, within 6 months, 84% of the refugees we serve are self-sufficient. What that means is that they have a job and they're paying their bills. And for me, I always think about if I was in a refugee's shoes and I had to do that. I was forced to go to a country where I didn't speak the language, where they had a very different culture and lifestyle than I did. Could I get a job in 6 months? Could I pay for my apartment in 6 months? And I don't know that I could. And so I think that speaks a lot to the character and the willpower of the folks that we're working with, and their drive to succeed here in the United States. Beyond that, refugees have a lot of success in our communities. They're more likely than the general population to start a business. About 13% of refugees end up becoming entrepreneurs as compared to 9% of the general population. And they also at greater rates become US citizens than other immigrants. And then once they are become those US citizens, they tend to vote often. And so what we see is that refugees do integrate into the US, both economically as well as socially and politically.
Do you know of any examples of some of these success stories, or have you talked to any of these refugees that have been able to successfully live here in Phoenix?
Yeah, so our country has a long history of successful refugees. Our founder of the IRC is Albert Einstein. He was a refugee from Germany who had to flee because he was Jewish, came to the US, and of course he's a well-regarded scientist, and also was a humanitarian who founded this refugee organization. I also like to point out to people that the Pilgrims would have met the modern definition of a refugee because they did flee across an international border due to religious persecution. More locally here in Arizona, we have a lot of great folks. There is a number of restaurants and shops that are owned by refugees in the Phoenix metro area. Some examples that I always like to share: Sinbad's restaurant over at 35th Avenue in Glendale is owned by a refugee from Iraq. Not only he arrived about 12 years ago, and in that time has opened a restaurant, opened a store. Between the two of them, he now employs about 20 people, and he pays taxes on all of that. And so he, as a single person, has created a successful small business, is paying taxes, is employing other people in the community. There's also other folks that are doing the same thing. Perodin Baderi is another person I like to cite. He has B&R African Styles. It's in Maryville. He designs his own African cultural fashion, as well as selling imported African fashions. And so there's lots of examples of these really great stores and restaurants throughout the valley that are owned by refugees, and they're contributing to our local economy and our local culture.
And to those who might have struggled when they have come here and finding job opportunities, how has the IRC helped with finding work for them?
Yeah, so we provide a few layers there. So first off, when we arrive, we provide a series of job training classes. So these include things on how do you prepare a resume, how do you dress for an interview. We also provide employment services. So we're actively trying to find jobs and trying to find places where people can apply. We have several partnerships with several employers, hotel companies and transportation companies, restaurants, where they've made a commitment as an employer to offer interviews to refugees, and so we provide those applications. We have specialized employment training classes. So one of ours that we're really proud of is a manufacturing career course, and that provides training specifically for manufacturing careers. And then again, we have some partners that are in the manufacturing industry, and we can connect refugees to that. For clients who might have more severe barriers, for instance, they have a disability, and maybe they were tortured in their home country and as such may have physical limitations on what they're able to do. We have specific programs for survivors of torture. We have specific programs for intensive case management and individualized employment services, where we're aiming to help those people overcome their specific barriers and help them connect to the community in meaningful ways.
Oh. So you just mentioned a lot of programs that the IRC uses to help these refugees, and you also mentioned that you help them have access to some of the government programs that also helps them. Can you name or describe some of those programs?
The government programs?
Yes.
So a lot of our programs are funded by the government, as well as through private donors. So the core of the Refugee Resettlement program receives federal funding, and about 70% of our programs here at the IRC are funded through government programs. Beyond that, when it's appropriate, when people are eligible, we'll also help them connect to other government benefit programs. So I mentioned one earlier, for refugees who might have had a job for a while and are now unemployed as a result of the pandemic, we're helping them connect to unemployment insurance and the other government relief benefits that are out there.
Okay. And then I have the last couple of questions for you, and this is just about how more youths can get involved with the IRC and with the refugee community. Do you have any advice for how they can help?
Yeah, so I think the number one ways that people can help is by helping us share and spread awareness. So again, sharing out things on the Facebook page, sharing out the website, and educating yourself through watching videos like this is also really important. But beyond that, I think volunteering is also a really crucial way. We've had a number of youth volunteers that have been critical for events that we've done in the past. Obviously, due to the pandemic, we're kind of taking a break with events, but one day this will be over and we'll have events again. And so that's another great way to get involved. We've also had youth groups that have organized donation drives. They've done hygiene kit drives or clothing drives on their campus, and then brought those back over for donation. So those are all really great ways to get involved.